Hello, America. I'd like to share some information with you today. There are no passive participants who achieve their liberation or freedom. And now, if you're going to be a passive learner in the process, you're going to have to allow for others to represent you. Now, when that happens, sometimes bad things happen. So when there's a problem, what should we do? Focus on the solutions and how can we address the issues of today. Potential solution I've come up with is writing a petition for policy reform in regards to precinct response protocol. Now, I suggest we require an officer of a different race or ethnicity to respond, for each instance that occurs, and possibly pairing two different racial or ethnic identity officers together based off of the needs of the district. I also suggest that we require police to maintain a level of precinct diversity that is representative of the population. And we have a good source of data for that through the collection of the census data.
What is the 2020 census? Every 10 years, the census records everyone living in this country. It's written in the Constitution and comes in a questionnaire that counts everyone who lives at your address on April 1st. The data can be used to inform funding for services like fire stations, schools, clinics, and representation that affect your community.
To determine what that necessary representation is.
Shape your future. Start here. Visit 2020census.gov.
Now, I have to say, domestic terrorism is not okay. And unfortunately, we lack the leadership that's needed for people to feel heard. I'm struggling to find proactive measures to reduce risk. And yes, systematic bias is a problem, and it stems from our own implicit biases. However, it is up to us as engaged citizenry to seek reform in areas that we know are immoral or biased. See, the thing with implicit bias is you don't even think you are biased until something happens to surface those beliefs. And it's in that moment that something causes them to realize the foundation of this belief or law may be incomplete. But the truth of the matter is, we're all biased in some way due to our own self-interest. Now, we obtain these biases from experiences, things we've been exposed to, and environmental factors, and we carry them subconsciously as baggage. And the only way to become aware of these implicit biases is by building a bridge of respectful communication. Now, I'll say that again, respectful communication that invites someone into your perspective to see things a new way from your point of view, and by showing them evidence. And now it's up to that person to either accept or reject that information. But since you're challenging their belief system, it causes them to fight, flight, or freeze. Now you have to give them time. Let them see that there's some merit to your perspective, and shows that it rings true in order for them to believe it for themselves. Now, however, if we're talking about an argumentative person that likes to trigger people, that causes them to stop listening. That's not what you want. So I have to say, build bridges, not barriers. Bridges. There's no passive participant who achieves liberation or freedom. And if you're going to be a passive learner in this process, you have to allow for others to represent you. And when that happens, sometimes bad things happen. Now, defunding the police department, I see your point, but is that really what we want? Cops are peacekeepers, and soldiers are warriors. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure what the current training regimen is, but we can find out. Google's our friend. I do know that training is different because the jobs are different. But the police should definitely be receiving some form of intercultural competence training. Now, I see where you're coming from, but I don't want to defund the police. First, I'd like to ask, what would you want to have become? What would you want to have them become more like? Security guards? Security guards. Because that's what I feel would happen, as no officer would want to risk or jeopardize their future, their family's future, or their career for doing their job to the best of their ability, the way they know how. Now, incentivizing officers to become passive in the face of lawbreakers is counterproductive. And I don't think that's what we truly want. But I agree with you that perpetual excessive use of force.
Prosecutors say Officer Derek Chauvin had his knee on George Floyd's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds.
Should definitely be punishable by a minimum.
They were very clear in their position that it should be first-degree murder charges and the other officers should be arrested too.
And you're out. However, not all officers have been trained to intervene when they feel another officer is the first responder and is excessively handling the situation. Now, when you're exerting your control of the situation, you need to stop people and step into that cycle and suspend all of your assumptions that the police, are biased in some way, because that's a stereotype and not true. Not all police are biased.
And the officer that stood by and just watched and let it happen, you're just as guilty, because you also have an obligation to protect that individual that you're arresting. It's time that we take these bad officers and speak out against them and start holding them accountable and hold them to the same laws that we expect citizens to abide by. They're not above it, and it's time that good officers start speaking out and stopping it.
We need to respect and check each other, not talk down and belittle each other. The policy changes would be especially useful when addressing emergencies or routinely enforcing the law. We need checks and balances. The officer, the suspect, the people are not the problem. The justice system is the problem. The system we operate on, known as our mental models, are the problem. Because we're operating on an incomplete set of data and our experiences, and that's skewing our actions in accordance to inaccurate data that we've been exposed to, assumptions based off of them. We need training and more experiences that help us distinguish between friends. Tasers should be gone. Some people have underlying health issues, such as heart murmurs and seizures, that can kill on contact with the taser. Geneva's Chemical Weapons Convention in 1990 outlawed mustard gas and all other chemical warfare weapons. And I believe that included tasers, because they're fatal, often. And it really saddens me to think that we've forgotten what we've already learned from our past mistakes. What has history taught us? Nothing? Time itself becomes an ally to the forces of social stagnation. Dr. King said, we must use time creatively in the knowledge that the time is always right now. Right to do right. Right now is the time to make our promise of democracy, and to transform our national pending energy into a creative sum of brotherhood. We found a taser I think is interesting. An alternative to a taser is a bolo wrap, I believe, and the direction should be led. It should lead our law enforcement tools. I just like to see more less than harmful options being used and developed and tested for long run, for the long term. And I've seen deployable bolo wires that are being tested for use instead of tasers. All officers on duty together are jointly responsible for the actions and behaviors of their fellow officers. Floyd's murderer had a partner who said that by watching his partner choke him, why? Why didn't he stand up? He stood by for 3 minutes, over 3 minutes.
Hey, let's talk facts. The guy is on the ground. He's laying on his stomach. He have handcuffs on. It's 4 of y'all, 1 of him. 4 of y'all, 1 of him. Who has control of this situation? It's not much one person could do against 4 people. Now let's get deeper, right? As an officer, you are a first responder, right? So if in the midst of you trying to gain compliance, someone is hurt, you have to render aid. So somebody saying, I can't breathe, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. You don't think to yourself and say, oh my gosh, this guy can't breathe. He might die. Let me render aid, right? Another point, officers, other officers, if you're going to be an officer that's going to stand there and not help when things go wrong, come on, like you don't see that? That's the reason I got behind this badge, right? Because I want them officers that's afraid to step up, I want to be the one to step up. If I see wrong happening, wrong is not happening in my presence, right? I'm going to check it.
And then he was just charged today, less than an hour ago. Accountability. There should always be accountability. Implement a 3-strike rule. Apparently, this cop's had 17 reports against him. No more. Accountability. Accountability and taking intervening action is the way to go. You have to take action. Knowledge is power. Power is the ability to act, to take action. When something seems wrong, what are you going to do? Become a passive participant in an act of violence? No, come on. Be the hero. We always want to be the hero. Surely we can do better. We will be better. Because I love you, and I hope your family is safe, blessed, and has a future. What if we amend the laws to the police unions and open up lawsuits to police officers who knowingly perpetuate, multiple violences and can get multiple strikes? All these, is this the honest and right thing to do? I mean, unions have done little to cooperate with abolishing violent behavior. What should we do? With that, I ask you, what can you do to make a difference? And God bless America. God bless you. And in God we trust. Peace.